They laughed as the dark liquid soaked the collar of her uniform and ran down the back of her neck, laughing because it was easy to laugh at someone who never fought back. The quiet girl stood, frozen for the heartbeat it took the room to notice what had happened, then felt the warm sting of humiliation bloom across her scalp. "Ink," they said later, as if naming the mess could make it smaller. The teacher hurried over, the bell rang, the students shuffled off, and in the chaos of footsteps and whispers, she reached up with trembling fingers and began to rub the ink into her hair because she could not stand the thought of going home and letting this be the moment that defined her. When one boy shoved the bottle into her palms, she heard him snicker and she whispered, barely audible even to herself, "Now watch her." Name was Aisha, though most people in her class called her nothing at all. Silence had been the default response to her presence for years. She kept her head down in group projects, answered in small sentences when called on, and read in the library until the sky outside was the color of tired promises. Her world was tidy, made of lists and bookmarked books and the careful and private rituals that let her move through the day without being noticed. Quietness was not a mask she wore to hide fear. It was the space she used to listen, to collect the edges of things others missed, the way the janitor hummed under his breath when he swept, the scar on a classmate's wrist he tried to hide with, a sweater, the way the art teacher's eyes softened at the word charcoal. Aisha observed more than she spoke, and because people preferred to be seen, not observed, they treated her as if she were the kind of person who could be walked over. The boys who poured the ink were a small storm, loud, practiced, and certain of their power. They had learned cruelty the way people learn sports, by repetition, by applause, by not being stopped. Their leader, Hamza, had once been the small kid with a chipped tooth who needed to assert something to feel whole. Now he sought that wholeness. In the small triumphs of humiliation, the girls who stood behind him laughed because laughter made them feel included. None of them expected resistance. Their cruelty was a rehearsal for adulthood, or so they thought. Aisha did not cry. She did something else. That afternoon at her kitchen sink, the ink dark in the basin like a small spilled night, washed and washed until her fingers were wrinkled. Her mother frowned at the ruined shirt and paid the dry cleaner without asking too many questions. The neighbors called and asked if she had plans for the weekend. There would be none. But while they arranged solutions for the stain on cloth, Aisha made a plan for something harder to remove, a plan that did not begin with revenge and did not end in silence. Now watch, she told herself, was not a threat but a promise. School felt different after the incident. The ink was a stain and a mirror at once. Everyone who had watched her humiliated themselves by watching. Some of the bystanders felt guilt and tried to make small amends, an extra smile, a tentative hello. Others doubled down on cruelty, as if the safest play was to join the majority. A small group of girls spread a rumor that Aisha had invited it because rumors are a convenient weapon when you want to avoid responsibility. The administration sent an email about respect and proper behavior, polite language that lacked the force to change the corridors where whispers echoed. Aisha, who had been taught to take comfort in books, found that books alone could not explain the shape of human meanness. She needed a language that other people would understand. She found it in a simple box at the back of the art room, a set of used ink bottles. Their labels torn, once loved, and then discarded for newer colors. The art teacher, Miss Sumina, noticed her one day and did not ask why she had been absent from class or why she seemed quieter than usual. She simply said, "You have an eye for edges," and put a blank sheet of watercolor paper on Aisha's desk. Aisha painted the blotches the way she had rubbed the ink into her hair, at first with jerky, embarrassed strokes, then with a rhythm that felt like breathing. The ink pooled and ran, and 3 hours later, there was a silhouette on the paper that looked like a girl in a storm and a small defiant grin all at once. Art became Aisha's language. She started staying after school, not to hide, but to create. Her drawings were messy and honest, and slowly, the quiet that had once made people think they knew her turned into something else, presence. People began to notice the little exhibitions Miss Samina would hang outside the art room. The drawings were Rathuses with smeared eyes, hands reaching not for help, but for each other. a classroom where ink rained down and turned into birds. Students who normally ignored Aisha paused to look. Hamza's friend Rashid, who had always loved comic books, lingered once and then again to examine a piece that showed a boy holding an empty bottle, but his face was turned away. Curiosity is a soft, powerful tool. The first true test came when the school announced a local arts festival. Students could submit work. Winners would have their pieces displayed at the town gallery. Sumina encouraged Aisha to enter. She hesitated not because she doubted her work, but because stepping into a public space meant the possibility of ridicule. And yet stepping back felt like accepting the role the bullies had assigned her. She chose to enter 2 pieces. 1. The ink silhouette of a girl who no longer erased herself, and 2. A mural-sized sheet that told the story of a classroom where small cruelties turned into something unexpected. The night before the festival, someone keyed the title of her mural. On the school wall, "Coward." It was a small, childish scratch that stung more because it was intended to be seen. These moments of graffiti are designed to be public punishments, and for a day, Aisha thought the world had decided what she would be. But she had learned too. Listen to currents where others felt only wind. That evening, a few students she had never spoken to knocked on her door and apologized with awkward, heartfelt words. They had seen her art and felt something. The girl who covered her head with a scarf and had once voted for Hamza to be class president shared a story about being laughed at in elementary school and how she had wanted to hide. A boy who shuffled his feet and said nothing gave her a comic book and said, "I like how you draw hands." They were small gestures, imperfect and human, but they changed the gravity around her. On the day of the festival, Aisha stood in the gallery, palms sweating, as people drifted by her pieces. The silhouette drew long stares. People were moved, some to tears. The mural, painted in violent strokes and gentle details, told more than the incident of the ink. It told of the invisible threads that tied people together: fear, loneliness, performance, the longing to be seen. Hamza came. He stood at the back of the gallery, arms folded, his jaw tight. He did not laugh this time. He watched as a woman stopped in front of the mural and said to her friend, "This is the truth." The truth landed in Hamza the way a pebble lands in a pond, making circles he could not ignore. Facing someone who had hurt you is a strange, delicate choice. Aisha did not seek him out to make him uncomfortable. She understood that humiliating him would only widen the valley between them and give him the one thing he wanted most: attention and power. Instead, she let her work speak. A week after the gallery, during a school assembly on bullying and empathy, a teacher asked for volunteers to speak about what had changed since the incident. Aisha stood up. Her voice shook at the beginning, fragile as an eavesdropped note, then found steadiness. She described the way a small bottle of ink had made her feel seen for the wrong reasons, and how being seen for the right reasons had changed everything. She talked about remorse and courage, and about how people had stepped forward to stitch small repairs into the fabric of the school. Hamza sat in the audience, his face unreadable. The assembly did not end in dramatic confessions. There were no cinematic apologies. But Hamza found Aisha in the corridor afterward and said, "I didn't think about what it would do to you. It came out clumsy and incomplete, but it was a crack in his armor." Aisha listened and then said, "It hurt." He said, "No." He looked embarrassed, and then older somehow, as if the admission had trimmed away the last of a careless boy. The transformation was neither fast nor absolute. People change in increments: a softened look, an avoided joke, an apology, that is, offered and then acted upon by better behavior. The deeper shifts were quieter. Aisha started a small club after school for anyone who wanted to make art for a reason. It was called the Ink Club, a cheeky reclaiming of the moment that had once been used to shame her. Students who had never drawn met there with smudged fingers and awkward brushes. They told stories and slowly practiced being brave together. A boy named Omar, who had once been in Hamza's circle, joined because he liked to build models and wanted to try painting on a whim. A girl with a shy smile brought in poems to be illustrated. They argued and laughed and learned to critique kindly. The club became a space where vulnerability was scaffolded, not punished. When someone made a mean joke in class, a dozen hands would now lift, not necessarily to correct the person sternly, but to check in. Are you okay? The culture of bystander silence had been nudged. The scar of that day did not vanish in a neat erase. Memory is durable. Aisha still flinched sometimes. When a bottle rattled, she still washed her hair meticulously before interviews and had an instinct to stay small when meeting.